car, SUV, or truck, guess what? You're in luck. Frontier Motors is down the street. Got the best deals that can't be beat. Don't overpay, come in today. Doing business the old-fashioned way. Frontier, we've got the right price. Frontier, we'll treat you mighty nice. Frontier Motors, low overhead country.
Hello and welcome to the Frontier Motor Show. My name is Ivan Struckel, owner of Frontier Motors, and we're happy to bring you the show for the last almost 23 years now. So for the next half hour, we're going to be talking about a little bit what's going on in the car industry and also what's going on in our neck of the woods here in Pensacola and at Frontier Motors. Now, you might think, hey, I'm not ready to buy a car. I don't really care about no car show. But this show is really about other people that you might know that might be in need of a car. And you never know when that's going to be. A lot of times, like we just had Hurricane Sandy come through, and so many cars got wiped out unexpectedly. We had lots and lots of calls the next day for people that were calling, not so much to replace their vehicle, but to find out what should my vehicle be worth. They've heard the show and they heard me talking about the fact that if you ever have a total loss or if you ever have a major accident, you make sure that you call Frontier Motors for that free advice that we always talk about, which is number one, what should the replacement value of my vehicle be? Not so much just the book value, but reality. And number two, also, if your vehicle is not totaled, but it's hurt and somebody else hurt it, you have what we call diminished value coming, because if the vehicle has been in an accident, especially if it's moderate or major, the value of the vehicle has now been diminished. Therefore, we give you a letter of diminished value. So hopefully the insurance company that hit you will, well, the person that hit you, they have insurance, will compensate you for the fact that your vehicle might be worth a little bit less at that point. So again, that's one of the reasons that we bring the show. We talk about a little bit what's going on in the industry, and one of the things that I just got is my new Consumers Reports. And if you watch this show, you know that I'm a kind of Consumers Reports nut. I especially get real excited when they have the car issue, which comes out twice a year, where they talk all cars, not just about everything else. And one of the things that I have to share is, how do the Consumers Reports, how do they rate their cars? What makes them the right way to go? And I've been, been at Frontier Motors for 23 years now. I've been reading Consumers Reports from cover to cover to see what they have to say about cars versus my experience with those same cars. And I would say 90% of the time, they're right on. The research is right on as far as which car is a safe car, which car is not a safe car. Especially reliability. I rate reliability on customers that have problems or issues with their cars that they've purchased, whether they've bought them from me or they just share the information about cars they've bought elsewhere. Remember, it's not so much the person that sold you the car, it's the car itself, and perhaps also the person that took care of it prior. And Consumers Report says, number one, welcome to the auto issue. Buying a car is a major financial decision for most people. For most people, it's probably the second most expense you're ever going to have other than your home. But it's also one that should be a pleasure. I always talk about that. It can actually be fun to buy a car, especially if you're not pressured in buying a car and you don't get those stupid questions that some car dealerships ask, like, what's it going to take to put you in one of these cars today? Stupid stuff like that. And you'll never have that at Frontier Motors. To help you focus on the fun of choosing a vehicle you love, Consumers Reports buy and scrutinize 50 to 60 vehicles a year to steer you to the right performing SUVs, trucks, and minivans. Marketing claims abound, but Consumers Reports is uniquely qualified to advise you because they never accept advertising. In other words, they don't accept bribes from anyone. And they buy vehicles that we test. They buy $2 million of vehicles they test every year. So they buy their own cars. A lot of times they can get a deal on the cars. A lot of times they don't. They don't tell them who they are. So when they go into a car dealership, they don't tell them, hey, we're Consumers Reports. So they buy these without anybody knowing who they are. And they drive these vehicles 90,000 miles a year. They've also made changes to address the fact that the world is in the midst of an automobile safety revolution. And this is one of the things that I talk about on this show all the time. And I remember years ago, not so much now, but years ago, people would come in, they'd bring in their 16-year-old kid and they'd be interested in buying a car. And one of the things that I was always surprised that hardly ever came up is people asking the safety ratings. And every once in a while I would have somebody say, well, what's the safety ratings on that car? Well, the safety ratings years ago almost were the same thing as the CAFE government gas mileage reports. They were a joke. You'd have an unsafe car, but it would be rated a 5. Well, safety has come a long way. And I can tell you that right now, the Consumers Reports, if you don't have if you don't have the automatic braking system, stability control, if you don't have blind spot, all these things are going to count against you. In some vehicles, they don't even rate them because they don't have the proper, or at least what I would consider the minimum safety features on the car. And one of the things that I've had happen now lately is, and this is where depreciation comes in, where a person will buy a vehicle and they will trade it in a year to a year and a half later. And I'll say, well, why are you trading the car in? And they say, well, I want the newest safety features on the vehicle. And the safety vehicle, things like, for example, blind spot detection, so that you can see if there's someone in your blind spot, especially like me, because my neck doesn't go very far anymore these days. So many injuries playing basketball that I can't turn around. So I don't like driving a vehicle without blind spot. I am driving a Wrangler right now. It's a 2015. They didn't have that feature available back then. And I really miss it. And I'm thinking about, I want to get a newer Wrangler that's got the blind spot so I can see if there's someone in my blind spot. I also like the automatic braking systems. And they came out with it years ago in cruise control. They used to call it laser cruise control or adaptive cruise control, which means that when you set your cruise, if the vehicle in front of you slams on their brakes to avoid an accident and you're not paying attention, your car will automatically hit the brakes. Well, now they have that where you, even without the cruise control, where if the car in front of you slows down or hits the brakes to avoid something, your car will automatically brake to avoid hitting them, whether you're paying attention or not. Excellent feature. Pedestrian and cross traffic alert are other features, and I can go on and out, but about some of the latest and greatest things that are important. And there is a pretty big price difference in some vehicles, like a Lexus, for some of these features extra. Consumer Reports in this issue said that the average cost to get blind spot is $2,500. Now, nobody charges $2,500 for blind spot, but a lot of manufacturers put them in different packages where you've got to buy a $2,500 package to get the blind spot. And I'll give you an example. That's true with a Lexus. A Lexus has the laser cruise control and the lane detection. You know, when you drift from one lane to the other, how it vibrates. That's standard, but blind spot is not. You've got to get the safety performance package to get the blind spot. Very expensive package. And the same thing on a Camry. Camry is one of the best cars that they sell, but I noticed in a 2020 Camry LE, for example, adaptive cruise control is standard, but blind spot is not. So if somebody comes in with blind spot, you have to get the safety package, which is quite expensive. So more and more people are keying on that and also asking for that. Unfortunately, the older cars don't have that. So you're going to be forced to get a newer car. But you can get newer cars that aren't that expensive that had a lot of the safety features. A Corolla, for example, has a base price of around $20,000 brand new, and it comes with the laser cruise control, the cross lane detection standard, and blind spot for another couple of $1,000s. So for $22,000, you can get a brand new Corolla with all the latest and the safety features on there. And also, by the way, one of the best gas-powered economy cars there is a Toyota Corolla. Excellent car. What makes Frontier Motors different when you're ready to purchase a car, even though it might not be right now? Number one is free advice. No matter what question you might have when it comes to the car buying or car selling, Frontier Motors will answer those questions at no charge. For example, what if you want to sell your car yourself? Let's say you're doing the Dave Ramsey thing. You're going from a 3-car family down to a 2, or maybe a 2-car family down to 1, or even as some families are even doing to 0 cars. You know, they're taking their bicycle, they're taking the bus. So you want to sell your car. Well, number one, you can call Frontier Motors and we'll just write you a check for it. That's the easiest way. But if you want to do it yourself, if you think you're going to do better that way than selling it to a dealer, we're going to give you free advice on how to do the paperwork, where to advertise it, what you should do on that particular car to get the car ready for sale, what you should spend money on. Now, these are things that we think is really important. An example would be if it costs $100 or $150 to get a professional detail done on your car, it's worth your while to do that. I had a lady the other day that dropped off a 25-year-old Mercedes, and she had spent a couple of $100 getting this car detailed. You would not know how old it was because the detailer was so good that he was able to wax that car with a buffer, and that car had a shine on it like you wouldn't believe. Well, that makes a big first impression, even on an older car. So if you're driving an old car, that's the number one thing that I would say to do. And a lot of people will wash their car every couple of months, take it through the car wash and vacuum it out. but I'm talking about a professional detail where they do the door jambs, they do the wheel wells, they do the inside and the outside of the windows. And of course, most importantly, they put a buffer on it and get that shine back on the luster of the car. And hopefully, of course, you've also maintained that car properly. And I always urge you to make sure that if you buy a car, that once you have it, you might not be able to get the prior records other than maybe through a Carfax report. But once you have it, keep track of your oil changes, keep track of what you do to the car, put it in a little notepad or put it on an electronic pad. They got different apps for car maintenance tips right now, but it really comes in handy when you want to sell your car yourself. Carfax these days is really good. That's another thing when we talk about free advice. We run free Carfax reports for anybody that needs them. And we do that even if you're looking at a car at another dealer. Some dealers have links to the Carfax, but when you click on that link to get the Carfax report, let's say you're on AutoTrader or you're on cars.com, you see a car that you like, it's for sale by a dealer or maybe a private individual, and they'll have a little Carfax or AutoCheck logo on there. And when you click on it, it's $39.95 plus tax to run a Carfax report. Well, if you're looking at 5 or 6 or 10 different cars, that becomes quite expensive. So what we've been advertising for the last 10 years is that we will run that $40 Carfax report at no charge. Now, one of the things that we get once you get a CID number to run that is we also have comparables on cars like that, what they're selling for in an area. So we can not only tell you what the history report says, by how many owners did it have, has it been in any accidents, are the maintenance records on the Carfax report? Sometimes they are, sometimes there aren't. It'll tell you where the vehicle was registered. If the vehicle's from Alaska, you might want to know about that. And even though maybe it's a one-owner car with no accidents, but it's from Alaska and it's 6 years old, you might want to get a thorough rust inspection on that vehicle. And I know that we had that problem. I'm from Wisconsin originally. And if you don't, back in the old days, this is 25 years ago, and I still lived up there, they told you to make sure you buy rust proofing. The newer cars are much better at the corrosion preventative methods they use when they manufacture the vehicle, that you might not need to buy rust proofing. But I urge you to get a thorough rust inspection if the car is more than 5 years old. Sometimes even if it's younger than that, just for the heck of it, if it's the cars from up north. And these are things that the Carfax/history reports will tell you. We use Carfax because it's the #1 provider. They do the most advertising, so it's kind of a household name in history reports. It's also, of course, the most expensive, but at Frontier Motors, we will provide that service for you. And we also, the way that I get sales off of providing this free report for you is that I can tell you what I can sell you a car just like that for. So if you're calling and you're looking at maybe it's a 3-year-old Lexus RX 350 and you want to know because your neighbor's selling the vehicle because they're getting a company car, or maybe they've got a 3-year lease and the lease is up. So they say, hey, I'm going to turn in my Lexus. Are you interested in buying it? And you say, well, how much is it? Well, if they tell you it's $35,000 as the lease buyout, but I can replace that car for $32,000, I might end up with your business if you're interested in a car like that. So a lot of times I'll get residual business off the fact that we have free advice. I talked a little bit about diminished value before. Diminished value to me is very important. Folks, if somebody hits you, if they run a red light, they broadside you, you've got $10,000 of damage on your car, or even if it's less than that, it's going to show up on a history report. And sometimes they say nasty things on there. For example, major accident reported. Vehicle was towed from the scene. Now, put yourself in the position of the person going to be buying that car when you sell it. And they run the history report, and I tell them, hey, by the way, just so you know, this thing's been in a major wreck. Well, what does the word wreck spell or think? What do you think about when you hear the word wreck? You think, I'm not buying that car, or you think, if I am going to look at that car, it better be a really good deal. And it better be a good deal because it has diminished value. A wrecked car, even repaired, is worth less than a non-wrecked car, if everything is equal. So we make sure that we tell you what the diminished value is. We give it to you in writing so you can go back to the insurance company, have them write you a check for diminished value. Because folks, if you turn around and trade that car in next week, it's going to be worth a lot less, especially when you're looking at the higher line cars. Even the lower cars have diminished value. But for example, If you're driving a $60,000 BMW and you have a $10,000 wreck versus a $16,000 Focus with a $10,000 wreck, there's going to be a difference in diminished value just because of the values of the car if you go on a percentage basis. One of the things I do have to put an asterisk on diminished value, it is only our opinion. There's no formula. We don't take 20% off if it's this car or whatever. We just give you our opinion. If I was taking the car in trade today versus a non-wreck car, what we would reappraise the car for at a lower value. We have sold cars that we've taken in on trade that have been in a wreck. Number one, we disclose it. At Frontier Motors, we put the Carfax report in the glove box of every car we sell. You don't even have to ask. You don't even have to ask for it. Let me turn this thing off. And so that makes it easier for you to go in the glove box and look at the Carfax report to see how many owners did it have, are there any issues. So we put that on the table right off the bat. And if we do have a vehicle that's been in a wreck, we try to get the history on the car, where was it fixed? And number two, also, how much cheaper are you buying it because it's been in an accident? Now, if it says minor accident, it's not going to be any different. If you have a fender bender with a mailbox or you hit a bicycle or something like that, and it shows up on the report as an accident, that doesn't mean you have diminished value. It's got to be at least a moderate or a major accident, or worse yet, if it just says damage reported. I've seen that happen. Damage reported. Well, now you don't know what it is. So I always, if I'm going to buy a car with damage reported and the person that has the car says, well, it was only $500, well, get it in writing, get me the estimate, and let's get that changed on that history report. And we can help you with that. We can tell you the phone number and who to call, get that done. We do, one of the things that we, when people ask me, well, what is different at Frontier Motors? The number one thing that we specialize in, and I try not to talk into specializations because we don't, we're not a Mini Cooper dealer. We're not a Corvette dealer. We sell every make and model. But if somebody were to say, well, what would you say your number one selling type of car is? It is the alternative to new. What that means is that we don't sell new cars, but we specialize in cars that are like new, which means they're from 3 months old to 15 months old, under factory warranty, clean history report with no issues. So that's what we specialize in. Now, because we sell and stock so many of those cars, we also take a lot of cars in trade that are in that $10,000, let's say $5,000 to $15,000 range. So don't think we don't sell inexpensive cars. We do sell inexpensive cars, but we take those cars in trade. We don't normally buy them unless it's from private individuals. At the auctions, we only buy cars that are warranted and guaranteed by the auctions. And then, of course, we do all our due diligence to make sure the vehicle does not have any issues. So the alternative to new, and one of the things that I normally bring is I bring a 60-second commercial from Dave Ramsey because he sponsors us. And we don't sponsor him. He sponsors us. He called us and said, hey, can I do a commercial for you guys? So we said, okay. And here's what he has to say.
Hey, Dave Ramsey here. Listen, there is a reason why car dealerships have such a bad reputation. They make it incredibly difficult to buy a pre-owned vehicle. But there's always the exception. In Pensacola, Florida, it's my friends at Frontier Motors. They've been serving the Pensacola community for 22 years. People hate being pressured when they buy a car, and I tell you that won't happen at Frontier Motors. They'll give you a total out-the-door price, and they'll put it in writing. Frontier also offers a free car advice service for the Pensacola community. So if you're ready to sell the car, call Frontier Motors for a fair price analysis and a free Carfax report. They love buying from private individuals. Or if your car got totaled, Frontier Motors will tell you what the replacement cost should be. To check out their inventory or see all the free services they provide, visit FrontierMotorsInc.com. That's FrontierMotorsInc.com. And don't forget to tell them Dave Ramsey sent you.
Yeah, Dave does such a good job. In 60 seconds, it takes me a half an hour to say what he says in 60 seconds. I should just do a 60-second commercial, not a 30-minute commercial about Frontier Motors. And this is indirectly, folks, this is a commercial for Frontier Motors. And one of the things that I always talk about, and we've been doing this for Dave said 22 years because it's from last year. We've been doing it for 23 years now, is that free advice thing I talk about. That's not just a gimmick or a joke. People come in all the time. They'll sit in front of myself or one of our managers. We have 4 sales managers there. and 12 salespeople, and they'll just come in and they'll say, hey, I want to sell my car. I want to buy a car. What do you think of this car? We actually do what we say when you come to the dealership, and people they acknowledge that when they come in, and they like coming in. Once you've been in the dealership, most people are very intimidated by car dealerships because, as everyone knows, their one goal is to sell a car. That's why they get up in the morning, and we're not any different from that aspect. We're just different in how we treat the customer, I learned a long time ago that not to pressure a customer into buying a car. Matter of fact, we're almost the opposite of pressure, where we're too lenient with customers when they finally say, well, don't you want to go ahead and do the paperwork and get this over with? Because we tell the customer they can buy a car when they're ready. We're always ready to write up a deal. We're always ready to take the check from you when you're ready to spend money or finance it. But we don't get pushy about it. And we want you to feel comfortable that when we give you a price on a car, that it's going to be the best price possible, that we've done our research to make sure we don't get embarrassed by giving you a high price and doing like some of these dealers where they'll throw a price at you, and by the time you leave, they've already come down $3,000 more, because immediately when they first gave you that price, they were charging too much for the car. And what we do is we do our due diligence before we come out and give you a price. So we have a price list that we can give you when you come to the dealership. It lists the cars in alphabetical order. It lists their mileage. It lists the NADA values, what the book value is. It also lists what our asking price is. And the next question that you would have after test driving the car to make sure if you like it, because you already know what the asking price of the car is. So now the next question is, do you like it? There's no reason to give someone an out-the-door bottom line price if they're not sure if they like the car. People say, well, I want to know if I can afford the car. Well, you already know how much the car is. How much leniency can there be? It's not like the old days, folks, where you walk into a dealership, and this is the same whether it was new or used, and they have a price on the car and they take off $5,000. All those things that they're taking off that you see in advertisements, especially on the new cars, those are all rebates and incentives. The markup on a brand new car is not very much at all anymore. It used to be 25% when I started in the car business in 1975. I remember selling a $10,000 Chevrolet Caprice, and the cost on that car was $7,500. That's a pretty big margin, so you could discount the vehicle and still make money on the car. Those days are all over. Some vehicles have as little as a 2 and a 3% markup, which means that when you walk in on some of these cars, you're not going to get anything off, because you got to make at least 2 or 3% to stay in business, but you will get a discount based on rebates and incentives that vary from throughout the year, depending on if it's a leftover and the new models are coming out. Which, by the way, in the new car year, that's normally in mid-July to mid-September, depending on the make, where the new cars come in and the older cars start becoming psychologically a year old. Sometimes I joke a little bit that you could have a 2020 model car and a 2021 that just came out, and they're only 2 weeks apart as far as birth dates. One could be a late 20, one could be an early 21, but people think it's a year different. That's one of the reasons that the history report comes in, because then you can tell when the vehicle actually hit the dealer's lot. So you can see how long the vehicle has been on the dealer's lot, if the vehicle has been titled. So the other thing that I really think is different at Frontier Motors is that we really don't sell cars. And people always snicker when I say that. Our salespeople more show you a car, you pick one out, we give you the price, then we write up the deal. That's not car selling. Car selling is when you walk in. Normally, this is when you walk into a new car dealership and they have to persuade you why the car that you're looking for at there is going to be better than the one you're going to look at across the street. And I'll give you an example, whether it's a Chevrolet and you're going to go look at a Ford. So let's say you're going to look at an F-150 Ford, and then you're going to look at a Chevy C1500. So those salespeople have been to school to tell you why their product is the best. It doesn't always come down to price. It comes down to, sometimes it's the features on the vehicle that you're looking at. Sometimes it comes down to color. Sometimes it comes down to whether you like the dealer. Sometimes it's the salesperson, whether or not you like the salesperson, because you end up living with that person for future service and calling them up if you have any issues with the vehicle. A lot of the times it has to do with consumer reports. How do they rate the car? But sometimes you've already made up your mind, but sometimes you haven't. And that salesmanship that salesman has that's the only thing they have to be able to sell you their car. And that's why they are so efficient at putting the pressure on, because they don't want you to walk across the street, because that guy might be a better salesman. Might not be a better vehicle, but it might be a better salesman that knows more about their product. And then they end up being talked into it, and you'll never see them again. So what do? They pressure you, The manager comes out. Everybody comes out to try to sell you a car today. Now, folks, don't get me wrong. We have managers, and our managers come out and say, thank you for stopping. Are there any questions I can answer before you leave? None of this high pressure things as far as, is there any way that, if I drop another $2,000, can I get your business today? I think, to me, that would be embarrassing. There can always be a little bit of negotiation, especially if you have a trade-in, because don't forget, folks, the trade-in value a lot of times is an opinion. You can go to 5 appraisers and get 5 different opinions on that car. The books are all going to be the same no matter where you go. But what if one dealer, like Frontier Motors, wants your car more than the dealer down the road? And that's why we give free appraisals. One of the things that we do, if you're going to buy a brand new car and you're going to trade your car in, wouldn't it be nice to have a free appraisal in your back pocket, so that when the dealership that you're at says, I'll give you $15,000 for your car, and you put all Frontier Motors appraisal at $17,000, you can say, wait a minute, I'm not even buying a car from those guys, and they're giving me $2,000 more than you. So you either better sharpen your pencil or I'm out of here. A lot of times what happens is the customers just come to us, and if we can't talk you into getting a car that might have very low miles, maybe it's 6 months old with 5,000 miles on, if we can't talk you into saving that money, what we can do is perhaps write you a check for your car. So that way you can go to the particular dealer that you're going to be doing business with without a trade-in. It just makes it for some people so much easier to make sure they're getting a proper deal. We've only got a couple of minutes, folks, and I want to remind everybody here that this Blab TV show can be found on YouTube. So you can go to YouTube, just type in Frontier Motors. The last 5 or 6 episodes are going to be there. Also, you can go to Facebook, and you'll see this on Facebook. You also see, you can go to Facebook Marketplace. You can also go to our website, frontiermotorsinc.com. You're going to see 300 vehicles in inventory. That's a lot of cars, folks, with usually between 20 to 50 coming in every single week. And that comes back to us buying your car from you, but that's a whole another subject we'll get into in the next show that we do. Again, Frontier Motors, we're at 230 Beverly Parkway. We would love to buy your car. We'd love to give you some free advice. When you're in the market, make sure you know who to call for that free advice. Thanks for listening, and thanks for watching. Have a great day. Auf Wiedersehen.
Looking for the best car, SUV, or truck? Guess what? You're in luck. Frontier Motors is down the street. Got the best deals that can't be beat. Don't overpay, come in today. Doing business the old-fashioned way. Frontier, we got the right price. Frontier, we'll treat you mighty nice. Frontier Motors, low overhead.